My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment, because what you are about to hear carries a truth that has been hidden behind a conversation you were never supposed to know about. Something happened when you were not there. Your name entered a conversation unexpectedly, and the moment it did, the atmosphere changed. Your soulmate was standing at the edge of a decision, carrying questions they had never spoken aloud, when a stranger stepped into their path and gave them a warning that sounded serious enough to make them stop. She looked directly at your soulmate and told them to be careful with you. She told them not to rush toward you. She even suggested that perhaps they should stay away. But what happened next was nothing like your soulmate expected, because before that conversation ended, the very same woman revealed something about you that turned her warning upside down. Do not move away from this message too quickly, because the most important part is not that someone warned your soulmate about you. The important part is why she did it, what she saw, and what she finally admitted after watching your soulmate's reaction. There are moments in life when a person appears almost by accident, says something confusing, and disappears before anyone understands the meaning. Yet later, everything begins to connect. This was one of those moments. Your soulmate did not know this woman well. She was not part of your story, not someone who had lived beside you, not someone who knew every chapter of your past. She entered the moment as an outsider, and because she was an outsider, your soulmate listened differently. There was no obvious reason for her to protect you, defend you, or make you look better than you were. That is exactly why what she eventually said carried so much weight. At first, your soulmate felt uncomfortable. The warning landed in the place where old fears had already been living. You must understand this, your soulmate has been carrying questions about you that they have struggled to answer. Some were created by distance. Some were created by silence. Some came from misunderstandings. Others came from people who only saw fragments of your story and tried to explain the entire picture. Your soulmate wanted to trust what they felt, yet there were nights when doubt grew louder than intuition. They wondered whether the connection was truly what it appeared to be. They wondered whether your heart was as genuine as they hoped. They wondered whether something hidden could one day change everything. And then a stranger told them to stay away from you. For one brief moment, it felt like confirmation of every fear they had been trying to silence. But heaven had not allowed that conversation to happen so fear could win. Stay with these words, because the detail that changed everything came only after your soulmate asked one question. They looked at the woman and said, in a voice quieter than usual, "Why are you telling me this?" That question opened a door. The stranger paused. She studied your soulmate's face. Something about their expression told her that this was not a casual relationship. This was not simply curiosity. Your soulmate's feelings were visible even though they were trying to hide them. The woman realized that your name had already found a deep place inside their heart, and suddenly she became more careful with what she said. She admitted that her warning had not been based on something terrible she knew about you. It was based on something she had noticed about your soulmate. That was the first surprise. She told them that whenever your name was mentioned, their entire energy changed. Their voice softened. Their attention sharpened. Even their frustration carried emotion that belonged only to someone who mattered deeply. She had watched your soulmate try to speak about you casually, yet nothing about their reaction was casual. She could see attachment. She could see hope. She could see fear. And she believed your soulmate was standing dangerously close to giving their entire heart to someone they still did not completely understand. So she warned them. Not because she believed you were wrong for them. Because she believed they were already falling far deeper than they were willing to admit. But that was still not the truth that left your soulmate silent. There was more. The stranger continued speaking, and as she did, the tone of the conversation began changing. She asked your soulmate what they truly knew about you. Not what other people had said. Not what assumptions had been created by silence. Not what social media, distance, timing, or old stories made them believe. She wanted to know what your soulmate had personally witnessed. That question forced them to remember moments they had been overlooking. They remembered how you behaved when nobody was praising you. They remembered small kindnesses. They remembered patience. They remembered the way you sometimes withdrew rather than saying something you would regret. They remembered moments when you could have chosen pride but instead chose peace. Your soulmate became quiet because they suddenly realized how many of their strongest memories of you contradicted the fears they had been entertaining. The stranger noticed that silence. Then she said something your soulmate was not prepared to hear. She told them, "I think you may have misunderstood this person." Those words changed the entire direction of the conversation. Pause here for a moment, because this is where what seemed like a warning became a revelation. The woman explained that she had initially believed you might be dangerous to your soulmate's peace, not because she had evidence against you, but because she could see how emotionally powerful your presence had become. Yet as she listened to your soulmate describe you, she began noticing something strange. Every example your soulmate gave while trying to explain why they were uncertain about you actually revealed something different. When your soulmate described you as distant, the stranger heard someone who had learned not to force their presence where they were unsure they were wanted. When your soulmate described you as guarded, she heard someone who had likely been hurt deeply enough to become careful with their heart. When they said you were difficult to read, she heard someone who had learned that not everyone deserves immediate access to their inner world. When your soulmate said you sometimes walked away from conflict, she did not immediately see weakness. She saw someone who might value peace more than winning every argument. And when your soulmate admitted that you rarely begged to be understood, the stranger became very still. Because that detail told her something. She said, "People who constantly perform their goodness usually need everyone to believe in it. Sometimes the person who does not keep explaining themselves has simply become tired of proving what their actions already show." Your soulmate did not answer. Something inside them had been struck. There are words that enter through the ears, and there are words that seem to travel directly into the heart. That sentence stayed there. It began pulling old memories into a new light. Your soulmate remembered occasions when you could have defended yourself loudly but did not. They remembered moments when rumors or assumptions could have made you bitter, yet you kept moving. They remembered that even when you were disappointed, you did not always try to destroy the image of the person who disappointed you. And suddenly, your silence no longer looked empty. It looked disciplined. Your distance no longer looked cold. It looked protective. Your mystery no longer looked threatening. It looked like the evidence of someone who had survived chapters that others never saw. Do not skip what comes next, because this is when the stranger revealed the surprising truth about who she believed you really were. She told your soulmate that some people carry a presence that others misunderstand because it does not ask for attention. They walk into a room without needing to control it. They care deeply without always announcing it. They remember small details while pretending they did not notice. They forgive things quietly. They leave when staying would require them to betray themselves. And because they are not constantly explaining their heart, people sometimes create false stories in the empty spaces. Then she looked directly at your soulmate and said, "From everything you have told me, I don't think this person is trying to confuse you. I think they may be protecting something inside themselves that they are afraid you will not value." Your soulmate's heart shifted. Because there was one thing they had never considered. Perhaps your hesitation had not been about lack of feeling. Perhaps it had been about the depth of feeling. Perhaps what they called uncertainty in you was actually caution. Perhaps what they interpreted as emotional distance was the result of someone who knew that once they truly opened their heart, they would not know how to do it halfway. And that possibility frightened your soulmate more than the original warning did. Because if it was true, then the story they had been telling themselves about you was incomplete. Your soulmate began asking the stranger more questions. They wanted to know why she had changed her mind so quickly. They wanted to understand what she had heard in their story that they themselves had missed. The woman answered slowly. She said the biggest clue was not what you had done. It was what you had refused to do. You had not tried to control every outcome. You had not forced your soulmate to choose you. You had not demanded constant reassurance. You had not turned every misunderstanding into an opportunity to punish them. And even during moments when you could have disappeared completely, some invisible thread kept pulling your attention back toward them. That is when the stranger realized something that made her original warning feel almost foolish. She had warned your soulmate because she thought you might have too much power over their emotions. But she suddenly understood that you might be the one who had been fighting hardest not to misuse that power. That revelation stayed in the room between them. Your soulmate stopped looking at the stranger as though she were someone giving relationship advice. They began looking at her as though she had accidentally uncovered something sacred. Something your soulmate had felt but could never explain. There had always been a strange contradiction around you. The closer they became emotionally, the more carefully you sometimes moved. When they expected you to rush forward, you hesitated. When they expected dramatic promises, you often gave smaller actions instead. When they wanted certainty immediately, you seemed to need time. Your soulmate had sometimes mistaken that for indifference. The stranger called it responsibility. She said, "Maybe this person understands that words can open doors they are not ready to walk through carelessly." Those words reached somewhere deep. Because your soulmate suddenly remembered one particular moment. A moment when you almost said something important. They had seen it in your expression. They had felt the energy change. You had looked as though a confession was resting just behind your lips, yet something stopped you. You changed the subject, or looked away, or allowed the moment to pass. Your soulmate had replayed that memory many times, wondering what you were about to say. Now, for the first time, they wondered whether you had stopped because what you felt was too serious to speak casually. And that thought changed everything. The woman leaned closer and told your soulmate that there are people who love loudly because they want to be seen loving, and there are people who love quietly because they are terrified of damaging something they consider precious. She said the quiet kind is often harder to recognize. It can appear as restraint. It can look like hesitation. It can even resemble distance. But underneath it, something powerful may be growing. Your soulmate felt exposed by those words because they knew this stranger had touched the exact question they had been carrying. Why does this person matter so much to me if everything feels so complicated? And suddenly another possibility appeared. Perhaps the connection felt complicated not because it was false. Perhaps it felt complicated because both of you were protecting something. Perhaps both hearts were waiting for the other to create safety first. Perhaps both of you had been reading caution as rejection. This is where the conversation became more mysterious. The stranger asked your soulmate something simple: when this person is gone from your attention, do you feel relieved? Your soulmate could not answer yes. Then she asked, when you imagine never speaking to them again, does your heart feel peaceful? Again, your soulmate could not say yes. Then came the question that silenced them completely. If everyone else's opinions disappeared tonight, what would you believe about them tomorrow morning? Your soulmate looked away. Because without the noise, without the warnings, without the assumptions, without old fears whispering into their decisions, they already knew the answer. They believed in you more than they had admitted. That realization was not comfortable. It was powerful. My child, there is something deeply revealing about the moment a person realizes that their doubts may not have come from their own heart. Sometimes fear wears the voice of wisdom. Sometimes hesitation disguises itself as protection. Sometimes people surround themselves with opinions because listening to their own heart would require courage. Your soulmate began to understand that they had been asking the wrong question. They had been asking, can I trust this connection? But the real question may have been, can I trust myself enough to see this person clearly? The stranger then told your soulmate that she wanted to correct her original warning. She did not tell them to rush into anything. She did not tell them to ignore wisdom. She did not tell them to abandon caution. Instead, she said something far more powerful. Do not stay away from someone simply because you are afraid of how much they matter. Your soulmate froze. Those words followed them long after the conversation ended. And what happened next is the part you need to hear closely. After leaving that stranger, your soulmate did not go back to normal. They could not. Something had shifted inside them. Your name began appearing in their thoughts differently. Instead of replaying the moments that confused them, they began replaying the moments that revealed you. The quiet ways you had shown respect. The times you noticed something nobody else noticed. The times you protected their dignity even when you were hurt. The times your expression said more than your words. They began realizing that they had been looking for proof of your feelings in dramatic places while ignoring the subtle places where your heart had already spoken. And once they noticed it, they could not unsee it. Stay with this, because the stranger had revealed one more thing before she walked away, something your soulmate did not fully understand until later. She had said, "The person you are describing sounds like someone who has already lost something important before." That sentence frightened your soulmate in a different way. Not because they believed you were damaged, but because suddenly your caution made even more sense. People who have never had something precious taken from them sometimes move toward love without thinking. But people who have watched trust collapse, watched promises change, watched closeness turn into distance, often develop a different relationship with hope. They do not stop wanting love. They simply stop treating it casually. Your soulmate began wondering what parts of your story they had never been told. What disappointments had taught you to become so careful? What promises had you once believed? Who had made you feel that showing your full heart was dangerous? What had happened in your past that made you capable of loving deeply yet reluctant to reveal how deeply? Suddenly they were not wondering what was wrong with you. They were wondering what you had survived. And that shift touched something sacred. Because when someone stops judging your walls and begins wondering what forced you to build them, they have finally started seeing you. The stranger had warned your soulmate to stay away. Yet by the end of the conversation, she had done the opposite. She had forced them to look closer. Your soulmate began feeling something they were not prepared for: regret. Not dramatic regret. Not guilt designed to punish them. Something quieter. They regretted the moments they assumed the worst before asking you the truth. They regretted interpreting your silence without understanding what lived behind it. They regretted allowing outside opinions to speak louder than their own experiences. And most of all, they regretted the possibility that you had been trying to protect the connection while they were wondering whether the connection was real. But the story was not finished. Because later that same day, something happened that made the stranger's words feel almost prophetic. Your soulmate noticed something connected to you. It may have been an old message, a photograph, a sentence you had once written. Something small that they had overlooked before. Yet this time they saw it differently. There was a detail hidden inside it, a detail they had never truly processed. And when they understood what it meant, the air around them seemed to change. They realized you had revealed more of yourself than they thought. You simply had not done it in the way they expected. You had been leaving clues through consistency. Through what you remembered. Through what you protected. Through what you refused to exploit. Through the moments when you chose restraint even though emotion was clearly present. And the stranger's words returned again. I think this person is protecting something inside themselves that they are afraid you will not value. Your soulmate suddenly understood that the something might be their heart. That possibility shook them. Because they had spent so much time wondering whether you would hurt them that they had barely considered whether you were afraid they might hurt you. That is the truth that began turning everything around. You were not simply the mysterious person in their story. You were not the confusing presence they needed to decode. You were not someone holding all the power. You were a human heart standing on the other side of the same uncertainty. A heart hoping. A heart watching. A heart wondering whether it was safe to believe. And your soulmate finally began to see that. But there is another layer, and this is where the stranger's surprising revelation became even more personal. Before their conversation ended, she had told your soulmate, "There is something unusual about the way you speak about this person. You are trying to convince yourself to move away while every part of your story keeps explaining why you cannot." Your soulmate had laughed nervously at first. But she did not laugh. She looked at them and continued. "You don't describe someone you have forgotten. You describe someone you are still emotionally connected to." Those words stayed with them. Because they were true. Your soulmate had been trying to place you in the past while their feelings kept bringing you into the present. They had been trying to call you a lesson while secretly wondering whether you were still part of the future. They had been telling themselves to detach, yet one mention of your name could still change their entire mood. The stranger saw it immediately. Your soulmate had been hiding it from themselves. And then came the sentence that changed the meaning of the entire warning. The stranger said, "Maybe I should not have told you to stay away from them. Maybe I should have told you to stop running away from what you already know." Your soulmate went silent. There are moments when truth does not need to shout. It only needs to arrive at the exact moment a person can no longer pretend not to hear it. That was such a moment. And now something is building inside your soulmate. Not reckless action. Not fantasy. A decision to seek clarity. They want to understand you for themselves. They want to hear your truth without other voices standing between you. They want to know whether the person this stranger described is truly the person you have been all along. And somewhere beneath that curiosity is a deeper question your soulmate is afraid to ask. What if I almost walked away from someone who was never trying to hurt me? That question has changed their heart. Yet, my child, the biggest revelation did not come from the stranger. It came afterward. Because once your soulmate returned home and replayed the conversation, they remembered something you once did, something so specific that it completely changed the way they interpreted your entire connection. At the time, they thought it meant very little. Now they understand it may have meant everything. And when they finally connected that forgotten moment to what the stranger had said about who you really are, your soulmate whispered something to themselves that they had never been brave enough to admit before. They realized there may be one reason you kept your deepest feelings hidden. One reason you never pushed. One reason you stayed quiet when you could have spoken. One reason you waited when someone else might have walked away. And the truth behind that reason is far more powerful than your soulmate was prepared to discover, because it connects directly to the one thing they once did that you never told them had changed you. Now your soulmate is remembering that moment. They are seeing your reaction again. They are realizing what your silence meant. And as this realization settles into their heart, one question is becoming impossible for them to ignore. What if the stranger did not simply reveal who you really are? What if she accidentally revealed why you have been waiting for your soulmate to understand something you could never bring yourself to say first?